maybe today can help you gain a much better appreciation of them. Have any of you been through caves before? Some of you haven't, some of you have. Has anyone been through Crystal Cave before?
I have.
You have? A little while ago? How about yourself?
A few months ago.
A few months ago, so quite recently.
Yeah.
I don't remember much about the cave.
I wanted to come back and get the story.
Oh, lovely. Fantastic. Now, there just are a few things to be aware of as we travel through the caves before, just for safety and conservation reasons. If you've been through caves, you're probably quite familiar of the environment. For those of you that haven't, just be aware that the path that we follow today does get a little bit uneven, so just mind where you are walking. And it is a little bit darker underground as well. There are plenty of lights. Just takes us a little while for your eyes to adjust, so just keep that in mind. If you are a bit taller or perhaps have a cap or a pair of sunglasses on your head, just be aware as you stand up, you do gain a couple of extra inches automatically. Although limestone is very soft, if you bump your head, I can guarantee you it may hurt just a little bit, so just take care. Conservation is something we also know and understand a little bit more these days, and as you wander through, you will see a lot of human impact. Tourists have been led through the cave for at least the last 100 years, and that's how we know and learn about these things. So we just ask that you refrain from touching while you are underground of the cave walls and the cave decorations. The oils from our hands do react, and this isn't immediate. It does take a long time, but it is a permanent discoloration. And the crystals do stop growing. So we know what curiosity is like, and we do learn by touching. So we do have some broken pieces in the cave that you'll get a chance to see what they feel like. We don't allow anything sticky in the cave, so no eating, drinking or smoking today, but if you've got some water and wish to take that down, you're welcome to do so. Have you all brought your cameras? No one left a camera or anything in the car? We do encourage photographs. Yeah. I know your cameras very well, so I'll leave it up to you whether you need your flash or not, but you're welcome to use that as well. Has anyone got any questions before we venture underground?
Is it cold down there?
It does vary within 2 degrees, from about 16 degrees in the first chamber to about 18 degrees in the last chamber. So if you want to take a jumper, you're welcome to. I'll leave it completely up to yourself, but it's not too bad down there. Okay, look, we've got 2 flights of stairs going down into the cave, and on the bottom right we've got some seats. So if you want to wander down, just let everybody catch up and give your eyes just a little while to adjust to the light. I've got everybody's tickets, so I know we've got everybody. Okay. 2 flights of stairs and seats.
You don't need a cap. Afterwards, you use this.
Is it painful?
Have you got much to go in that one swing? Do you think you could finish it before you go down?
Is it painful inside?
No, it's not painful inside.
Painful.
No. Painful?
Yeah, I can get down.
One more hit.
Be careful of sitting, eh?
Good question. I'll have a little chat about that.
You were right about the dark.
Okay, walk carefully, I hold her.
Oh,
Hey, I don't want to stranger down here, okay?
yeah.
Hold on, we're going to see. It's stressing.
This thing also.
Yeah. Mommy, I'm going to where is it?
I just give you a little bit.
Sorry.
I need to go in the wall.
Open there. How's everybody feeling?
Yeah.
Pretty good? It's
Just
not too
the ice
bad. It's quite
already.
comfortable down here.
It's just the ice.
So it's not 100% dark down here. There are lots of lights, but because you've come from really, really light to really dark, it just takes a little while. So we'll just stop here for a few moments to help your eyes adjust.
Did anybody build that pillar here?
These have been done, by man, not something that's naturally sitting there. I suppose in the early days, when they actually did a little bit of work in the cave, was around the Depression era during the 1930s. So tunnels were made bigger to allow more people to wander through on a guided tour. So a lot of the rocks, instead of being taken out of the cave, were placed around the cave. Used to construct pillars as well, maybe for extra peace of mind in those days too. These days we generally understand stability of the cave a little bit more. Someone asked me about bats earlier as we were coming down, so I thought you might all like to know. The opening into the cave, which is just this little bit here as we've just come through, isn't actually large enough for bats to travel into the cave. So we don't have any in Crystal Cave, and we do have a solid door as well. Though they are known to live in some of the other caves in the park, we have about 580 caves at Yanchep National Park. So that gives them a few. But there is one particular cave over near the golf course called Yanchep Cave. It was found around the same time Crystal Cave was found, and that had a lot of bats living in it. But the guano, or the bat droppings, were actually used in lots of other things, and the bats eventually left the cave. They've since put a bat-friendly door on the cave, but no evidence that the bats have returned. But they do live in some of the other caves. Snakes is always something I get asked about as well. Not something we're likely to see today. It's just a little bit too cool for them below the ground. If they come down, it is often by accident, and they'll find their own way out of the cave.
This cave is going deep down or just
Actually,
slopes?
if you haven't been through Crystal Cave today, what you'll actually notice today is that we don't go very far below the ground. We've only come 9 metres, and we've reached the very first chamber of the cave. They are quite shallow compared to other caves, and we reach the floor of the cave in the very next chamber. So we actually have limestone that's sitting on sand, and on average the limestone in the Yanchep area is only about 10 metres thick. So very, very, very shallow. Those of you that haven't been in a cave before though, just imagine an ancient sand dune sitting here, created over hundreds of thousands of years, originating as marine sediment, grains of sand, shells and tiny marine fossils that have been blown in and compacted below the ground. And simply created by a natural underground stream of water dissolving up through the limestone. So a natural stream flows to us from our Nangara Mound, contacts the limestone and dissolves the calcium carbonate. So 200,000 years ago, the roof was actually much lower than this, very, very narrow, and the walls simply cannot support the weight of the roof. And gradually over time, it creates a much more stable dome-shaped roof, as you see here today. Now, because we're not going very far below the ground, we're actually going to, well, the cave's much, much wider, and we're going to do a big loop around the cave and return back to this very spot, leaving the same way we've entered. Come over a little bit closer, we've got a little photograph over here. A bit hard for everybody to see, so maybe the little ones might like to come to the front. This is the one behind. This photo was taken about 1927, shortly before the cave was actually developed with paths, stairs and lights. The gentleman sitting in the middle actually found the cave in 1903. That's Henry White. In fact, where you got your tickets from today, you might have seen Henry sitting in the fireplace with his lantern, and the same picture sitting just above him on the mantle there. Although his tours were led a little bit differently, no fancy torch, but simply following the natural stream around the cave on hands and knees. Sound like fun to anybody?
No torch at that time.
No torches, no. A little candle, lantern, or a flare. So every square inch of the cave today, imagine it's been crawled and climbed over. Alright, we'll go down a little bit further, just behind your feet. The path just get a little bit uneven. Now with 19 people, it is a little bit hard for everybody to see all at once, but as we do move through, stop between these large rocks here and just have a brief look above your heads. You'll actually notice some large holes in the ceiling with a little bit of light coming through, so you can appreciate we're not very far below the ground. What we call solution pipes, and where water or rain has just been eating its way through. The roof is much younger and much thinner. It's also important to allow the cave to breathe. Exhale in the morning and inhale in the afternoon. As we continue through, just mind your feet. Once again, a little bit uneven. It's a little bit low, a small bridge and a small flutter.
See outside on this one. See now.
I'm so cold.
See now. Very nice. See the hole. You see the hole now. Oh, there you see the cup.
No, it was more.
It's raining. Water come down.
We'll die.
Can we hold for a bit?
We'll die.
Can we? Slow. Careful, mate. Take this.
Now you've all got a very important job. The ones in the back won't be able to hear me, but they need to know they've got to bend. Okay? So just letting you know it is a little bit low. Give yourselves plenty of room before you stand back up. There are some wooden supports on the other side, so just stay low until you know you have plenty of room to come back up.
It's a bit low through here. You got to duck.
How are you feeling? Feeling a bit better? Picture?
My goodness. Did we go in which way?
Which way? Well, we're going to have a little chat here first, then we'll wander up the stairs so you can have a closer look at these on the ceiling. And then what we're going to do is we're going to walk around the water so you can have a look at that as well.
Do it this small.
Okay, so we've actually now reached the floor of the cave and only 13 metres below the ground. You can see that lovely sand floor. Where our natural stream actually used to flow. Unfortunately not anymore, hasn't done for quite some time. It now actually sits 2 metres below your feet. The reasons for this, and there are many, but the main ones are due to lack of rainfall. We actually have recorded our second driest winter on record. We've got an increase in population. 60 to 70% of Perth's drinking water is extracted from that natural underground stream that once created the cave. And if you've travelled along Wanneroo Road or Indian Ocean Drive, as it's now known, not far from the cave, lots of pine trees as well. They draw lots of water and act like umbrellas when it rains. So a lot of natural rain actually filtrating back into the soil. So it literally disappears into the air. What you can actually hear, not far from me, is water being pumped artificially back into the cave. This is mainly to do with the natural health of the cave, and without the water it does affect the temperature and humidity as well. But a cave though is a natural source of water for many things, and I'm not sure if you did recognise it, but there is something that is dependent on water for its survival, just over here. Often mistaken for a copper pipe.
No, it's a root.
Well done, it is a tree root,
Tree root.
yes. Belonging to a chewit tree
It's a
or
tree root.
eucalyptus gonfocephala, the dominant vegetation in the park. And in fact, they only grow along the Swan Coastal Plain from Cervantes a little further up in the north to about Busselton in the south, usually around limestone. Not only are they important above the ground, but below as well. You can see some fine hairs just coming through here in search of water. They provide habitat for another creature living in the cave. Just like to let you know it's actually not this big. The creature is much smaller. It's only about 4 millimetres in size. And he feeds on fungus. And unique to Crystal Cave. This particular one found nowhere else in the world. So you can imagine, no water in the cave, no food, so not many of these anymore. So there has been attempts to bring water back in to increase the tree roots up, and in fact you can actually see it just around the edge of the path there. Coming down in front of the stairs. So by bringing the water in, the tree roots are encouraged back up, and hopefully if there are any surviving in the cave, they'll increase in number. However, they do believe that they've possibly moved down with the water and living somewhere else in the cave. Now, if you'd like to know which way Henry came through the cave, we're really lucky with the tunnel. How'd you all find coming through there? No one bumped their heads today? Fantastic. If you'd like to come in a little closer this way, and maybe just a little closer this way, come down from the stairs so you can see as well, just on the other side of that tree root, you'll actually see a little ledge. A little bit small. Maybe you might like to come up another step or two so you can see. Henry actually came from under there, following the natural stream in the cave.
The first person coming here was that.
So he had no official pathway, but he was pretty clever. Knew the water had made its way around and he just followed it. Just enough room for him to squeeze through. And we'll go up and have a look at something I'm sure you're all very familiar with. I love the cave decorations. Just be aware of your feet going up the stairs, and it does get a little bit low just on the ceiling. Nice. I find that third chamber is really good for photos. It's a bit brighter. There he is. Yeah, who have you found? What does that look like? Okay, if you like, keep coming up a little bit more. We've just got a few more to come through. We usually fit 30 up here quite comfortably, so 19 we should be okay with a little bit more room. So I know we do get very close to the decorations here, but I just once again just ask that you refrain from touching them. Very tempting, I know, but there are some broken pieces just around the corner. That's right. So depending on how the water comes through, yeah, that's how they something I'm sure most of you probably have seen it many times before. Some I think for their very first time. There are cave decorations, cave crystals, or speleothems as they're properly known. As you can see, they all grow very differently. They grow by water, dissolving through the cave. Just like the cave's created, but imagine in a reversal. So as rain falls, it collects carbon dioxide, becomes slightly acidic, dissolves through the limestone, collecting calcium carbonate. Little bones of tiny fossils that have been compacted over the years. And as it enters, it creates little water droplets. You can see some hanging just above your head. When each one actually drips, it leaves a little bit of calcite on the ceiling. So one by one, they get a little bit longer. There's always a bit of confusion as to which goes where, but the ones hanging from the ceiling are stalactites. They hang on nice and tight. Water will splash on the floor, leaving a little milky white spot. There's one just there. And very slowly, they get a little bit taller. They might make it to the ceiling, so we call them stalagmites. Growth rates do vary from cave to cave, but roughly 2.5 centimetres every 100 years. It just depends on how much rain and how quickly it comes through, among many things. But here at Yanship, it does come through really slowly. Just no touching. No touching. I'll explain around the corner as to why. You might
How old is
understand
this?
roughly. These ones are a little bit harder to gauge because the water's actually not just dripping, it's actually flowing down like you can see here. So it's probably little bit harder to gauge.
100
Yeah,
years?
done.
Give you that exact
每
figure.
次好像一个人像。
This is actually called flowstone, so it's flowing over a slope or rocks in a cave.
Looks like a
In fact, if you look even closer, you might see a little face,
like what?
Shoulders,
Like a seal or what?
knee,
Like
and
Like
your
a
toes.
people, like a people.
A lucky Buddha, King Kong,
what? Looks like what then?
giant octopus on the top.
Yeah.
Octopus. Looks like octopus.
Now, sometimes the water will do something a little bit different. Instead of flowing over the rocks or dripping to the floor, splashing down from the ceiling, you'll actually sort of roll down to the ledge, leaving a bit more of a streak of calcite behind. They're called shawls. Maybe a lovely rasher of bacon as well.
Are we at end of it?
Elephant ears.
Can see.
Oh, a tablecloth or handkerchief.
Anyway, to go from here, no worry.
And down there is water.
Looks like a
Oh, down there, yeah, we've got a little bit of water. We'll have a closer look at that in a little while. So that's just being pumped into the cave. There's a plastic liner to stop it from disappearing. And the noise you can hear is just the water moving through it. I'll actually turn that off shortly to allow the water to settle, so you get a lovely mirror image as well. So I'll leave you to take some photos if you like and have a little bit of a look around. Then when you're ready, we'll continue back down the stairs and we'll veer off to the left. So just once again, if we refrain from touching, I've got some coming up around the corner. If you have a look up the back, you can actually see where it is still quite active. Water's dripping from the ceiling, splashing on the floor.
What's the up there? Shadow.
We'll need a little light on them. Something that I think they are working towards. Just a little diagram here. I did briefly talk about it before.
因为水下面有塑胶，它水会流出去。拿这个，伸出来水
So a cave really is a very important link to the environment. It provides water for the trees, so the trees are not only important down here for the little amphipods, but also above the ground as well. Trees are important for survival of our threatened white-tailed black cockatoos, or cannabis cockatoos. Their numbers have dramatically dropped in the last few years. In fact, you might even see them flying around in the park today. The same tree that you saw earlier actually comes up just here. So recent times there was a very small little pool of water here, so if you visited the cave a few years ago you might remember that. To encourage the tree roots up, start the root mat, but they did find the water was actually disappearing down below. So these days it's just contained with a little liner. So you're welcome to wander around and have a look at those lovely reflections in the water. So these days it really helps with the temperature and the humidity. It helps keep the moisture in the cave and keep it nice and healthy. But also so you can appreciate what the cave is looking like.
那边，看清楚那边。在喝酒，你看看清楚。那个男的跟女的讲话，那饮水。
The rest here? Yeah?
There's a fire.
Yeah, here for sure. Oh, the whole cake.
Cuckoo. These are the
Like a chance to see what they feel like. You're welcome to.
yeah.
Are you up there very shortly?
I did look at this. I need to hear this. Look, when I'm down, I'm here. Hey, what is this? Mom! What? Wait. Just like a picture of the science.
It's the lemon.
Yeah, it's a...
It's the lemon. This is real short lemon.
I see the operations crew, when they actually do bring rocks down to add or to take or whatever, they're lugging rocks up and down the stairs. So I can only imagine what it would have been like in the 1930s when they didn't even have that. So, you know, extra peace of mind as well, you know, to fill up support the roof. I was actually told that many years ago there was a column in the middle here. I found a crack in the ceiling. So they built a column thinking it would actually support the roof. But later
Didn't need it.
yeah, so these are all things, you know, we learn at the time.
Yeah.
So we all had a little touch. This is probably the best place to do it, because once we leave this part of the cave, we won't be able to touch anymore. So if you haven't had a little touch, good idea to do it now.
Touch it, touch it.
So good time for you to curb any curiosities, but also for me to explain why we refrain from touching them. It's a little bit cool.
Another kid there.
Another cave is through there. Now that tunnel was actually dug out in the late 1960s, so we can walk straight through to the third part of the cave, and that's how we do a loop
They
around.
can't smile.
Not really. It's still quite wide, but sometimes it can get a little bit low, so we just need to mind our heads, that's all. Now bringing the water back into the cave is actually working quite well. If you haven't noticed it already, you will see a lot of this around the cave. That's only just water droplets, it's just moisture. That is how the cave got its name. You can only imagine what Henry may have thought he found. Oh, diamonds, crystals. And that inspired him to come up with the name Crystal Cave. Without bringing the water in, the cave would actually dry out, so it's working quite well. The different colour variations, if you are wondering, the lovely red tinge here is just other minerals in the soil, not only calcium carbonate, but iron oxide, and something called tannin. By putting out a tea bag in a hot cup of water, I guess. And this one here, just so I do have everyone's attention, this is why we ask that you don't touch the decorations. The effect is not immediate, but it is permanent. If you have a look at the stalactite above your heads, if you haven't already seen it, you can see the difference in colour there.
Very clear.
Very clear, very fresh, still quite active.
Yes.
After touching them, they start to look a little bit more like this. They start to discolour, start to deteriorate, and eventually will look like these much darker pieces here. Okay, a little bit of light.
Very dull. Become very dull.
Lose that lovely transparency.
Why is
No
it so?
transparent.
Because it just forms a film or a coating over the top. It takes a really, really long time. So as you travel through, particularly the last part of the cave, you will see a little bit of this, where someone's walked past and simply touched it with their hand, and it does take a little while. Conservation wasn't really understood or known of in those days, and there was no official pathway to follow. So the only way around the cave was to crawl and climb over everything. Souveniring everything as they leave. 9 times out of 10, someone will ask me if they actually fall off. That's why they think has happened here. These have come from other caves in the park, but most of the ones you see that are flat have actually just been broken off. Well, souveniring is what they termed it then. Not a term we usually use and not something that everybody really understands, but vandalism is something more commonly used these days. In fact, we had someone that broke into the cave going back a few years ago now, and they were caught and they got into a little bit of trouble. So it's amazing what a good 100 years does.
Broken and stole, broke up some.
Yeah, broke off some little pieces. There's one in the last part of the cave, you've got the stalactites that are flat, that haven't touched the floor. And the one on the right hand side, when the guide came in the next morning, that was actually sitting on the floor. So the people that had come through, whatever they did, you know, good boot, it's actually come off. Yeah. So, yeah. We do have a little picture over here you get asked about, so if you're wondering what it is, it's actually taken about 1993, before the water disappeared from the cave. Looking back that way. You can see it is quite different, and really not that long ago. Still a lot of water. It was 1993. The lighting is also very different. It's not as bright anymore. They found that the artificial lighting that was in the cave, and it was put in from the 1930s, was very bright, 240 volts per light. The extra heat actually allows an algae to grow in the cave. You might have already seen it, but there is a little bit over here. It's called lamp and flora. No natural light in the cave, so it's not something that should grow down here. So recently the whole lighting system was replaced with LED lighting at a lower frequency, so it doesn't allow any growth in the cave. Okay, shall we see what's on the other side of the tunnel? It does get a little bit low, so just mind your heads. And yeah, so always have a bit of sand in our shoes. So if you like, come a little bit closer just so everybody can come through easier. I always confuse a few with the tunnels here. We'll actually head back through that one as we head back to where we started. So the one we've just come through just connects the two chambers, allowing us to do a loop around the cave. But the tunnel on my left here was put in for a different reason. Following an earthquake at Meckering back in 1968. Measured about 6.9 on the Richter scale and was felt here at Yanchip, so that one went in just in case. You'll be glad to know it's not something that we've had to use, but it's always fun for echoes when we wander through there. Now we have reached the last part of the cave and you can certainly see much more active too. In fact, there's a nice little sparkle just behind you there. This is how we like to see them. Now a lot of our rainfall obviously comes through in winter time, which we're actually heading toward the end of now. Some parts of the cave are still fairly active. Just because you don't see water dripping through doesn't mean it's not flowing through there somewhere. And you'll notice a lot of souveniring going on here as well. Many of these are flat and broken. Someone usually points out a little light bulb sitting up the top there that's been left behind, either from the 1930s or 1950s when they did a complete refurb of the lights. Yeah, I left it there, so I don't know if the connection is still there or not. I'm not 100% sure, but it's probably a nice little bit of flow stone. So maybe turn the lights on to get that nice little see-through effect going on there. If you like, I'll leave you some time to wander through, but we are a big group, so just be aware to give yourselves a little bit of room. It is a little bit low, so mind your heads. We'll do a little bit of a loop and we'll actually come back out the same way. There's some stairs you're welcome to wander up. Always a nice spot to take a group photo or a backdrop for photos. cave extends a little further up, so continue along the path. Sorry.
Is it getting smaller?
Getting smaller.
Oh, you can stand.
Probably not smaller, but the path probably just isn't as big.
Careful your head. Mark. Turn.
No.
Don't forget.
Yeah.
There, take picture lang yun. Beautiful.
Mind your head.
會會執飯喎，細啲啲嚟。
Okay, going back probably a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, they actually only had
See the crystal there? Nice. Oh, you see the crystal there?
Yeah, see. Can I take one? That is the crystal. That is the crystal.
Generally this part of the cave is a little bit more active. Oh, up the end, yeah, that's just where water's been trapped. So as I was saying, just because you don't see water actually dripping through, it doesn't mean that it's not there. It'll follow cracks and fissures to come into the cave. So in that example, you would have had limestone like that. And it's come through, been trapped. Obviously, calcite's a lot more concentrated, so it's been flowing through there without dripping the water into the cave. Then at one point, that limestone actually had dissolved and then exposed. I've seen decorations where it's been active for probably a couple of years, and then after that it's not been as active, but the spot next to it will actually be a little bit more active. So it really just depends on the water itself as to what it wants to do. Sorry?
They don't dig up the
They don't dig up? No. These, it's a crystalline formation, but there's no money value, I suppose, to them. In the early days, they would polish them up for jewellery and things like that. But I suppose in their natural environment, they are precious. But as no dollar amount to them. I know there's things that are similar, depending on the mineral in them. But calcium carbonate.
Why do people dig it? Not enough cash.
Before we do wander off, if you have a look on your right hand side, we usually get asked about Batman, Scooby-Doo, Harry Potter, those that are usually involved with caves. We have someone just as famous, I suppose, just on the right hand side, fast asleep in bed. You can't see her, you're not alone. I don't want to get anybody's eyes with a torch.
one by one.
There we go. Yep, so there's their face, pillow underneath, blanket across the bed, and a big feet at the end.
Alright, you'll have to do that again. You see the Yeah, that's what they were saying about it too. They did somewhere else and the guy was saying this and this and
So yeah, sort of 3/4 of the way up on the right hand side. She's laying in her bed, covers up to her chin. So there's her face,
Oh yeah.
pillow underneath, blanket across the bed, and a big feet at the end.
Oh, that's the bedpost.
Or bed post if you prefer. Someone suggested a couple of dwarfs sitting at the end as well.
Oh, goodness.
So whatever you're more comfortable.
Whatever, yeah. We'll make up our own shape.
Oh yeah, he does it.
Oh, that would be great.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Cherie,
Yeah.
can we get a photo up here? Can you turn that up? The three of us?
Sorry.
No, you're all right.
Come on,
Someone
Merv.
like to hold the torch maybe?
Come on, Merv.
Oh, for the photo.
Oh, he's not going to come.
No. Doesn't like photos.
So it's just the two of you?
Just the two.
Just the two of you?
Now head over the top.
Okay, so on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Drink like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like, I'll take one from the other end. One, two, three.
Wet ones inside there too, right? I got
Thank you. Oh, you're welcome.
Is that tag up there measuring the earthquake?
Yeah, just measuring movement in the cave. So the tag's just to identify which one it is.
Yeah.
I've got one around the corner I usually talk about. It's just easy.
Yeah, on that,
for a
that
bigger
rock.
group.
The,
But the tag's just got a number. You'll find that increases as we do the loop around the cave.
yeah.
A little bit of glass is what you measure. So there's one just here.
Yep.
Here, so any movement that'll break, and it's just an observation we can make then.
Thing, because it's
I've already been
connected
through
to
this morning and checked them
Meckatering.
all. Yeah, well, we had that earthquake at Meckering, but I know some of them were actually put in the cave before that earthquake actually happened.
Yeah,
And then the tunnel was put in about a year later.
yeah, because that's the story I wanted to get.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's got the snake head coming out of the rock thing, is it? Where the other tags are, where that boulder is.
Whereabouts is that?
There's a boulder in the cave where they've got tags on it, with the glass on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's not that one? It looks like a snake head.
In Crystal Cave?
Yeah.
I'm not sure actually. It could very well be.
The last one I had was an Aboriginal guide, and they told me about that story because it was to do with the Waggle, and that the thing was connected to the Meckering earthquake, because if you look at it on a certain angle, it looks like the head of the serpent.
Oh, there you go.
And
yeah.
then-
So everyone sees things.
Yeah, and then next to it there's a rock with a crack in it, and it's got those measuring glasses.
Yeah, that's the one where I talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Actually, there was one gentleman that actually thought that happened because of the earthquake.
Yeah.
Yeah, not enough evidence to back that up. But
Yeah.
All right. Actually, before we wander off, we've got a few already ahead of us. Just above, something a little bit more unusual, we've got a helictite. It grows a little bit differently to a stalactite or a stalagmite, defying gravity, I suppose. Lots of different theories on how they think they grow. But just very slow moving under immense amounts of pressure, so ultimately it can grow wherever it likes. That's one of those weird and wonderful things of nature. All right, we're going a little bit further. So, guys, do you know which tunnel we're going through now? Which tunnel we're going to go through? Yeah. Well done. So if you want to go through there and just stop just on the other side of that, you're welcome to. You keep going through if you like. Yeah, you might even get a bit of an echo. You can go through.
They need to put this inside.
This was put in following an earthquake a few years ago at a place called Meckering.
Because make it looks not natural.
No, it's not natural. It was put there. I was told that at one point they thought it was a lot softer in the cave, so it wouldn't take as much impact. And also there was a gentleman who thought there was actually an effect from the earthquake, so that's why the location was here.
Make here, please.
These days, if something were to happen, we would head straight for the exit or the entrance, whichever one.
Yeah, this is it.
Yeah, this is it here. Yeah.
Snakehead.
Oh, that's what was confusing me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I actually see something a bit different. So depends on who the guide is to what they actually see. Yeah.
If you get it on that angle, it looks like the snakehead with his two
you
nostrils
go.
and the thing.
There you go. Yeah, so imagination's
And then
funny,
that
isn't it?
rock here has the tags on it.
That's right. I just find this area a little bit easier to explain, but this is something you've seen a lot already. These little bits of glass with the little red tags on them. These are what we use to monitor movement in the cave. They're called telltales. The disc has a number, which you would have seen has been going up as we've done the loop around the cave, but there's a little bit of glass sitting across a fissure or a crack in the cave. Any movement and the glass will break. Part of our job every morning is to walk around the cave and check these. You'll be glad to know I've already done that and they all look perfectly fine. There are about 47 around the cave and the disc just makes it easier to identify. If we were to report a broken one, rather than saying to them we have a broken telltale, we would explain number 31 was broken and they have a map with the identifying spots on that. So it just makes it a little bit easier for that. The earthquake at Meckering, I do believe some of these were put in place before that. And by about 1997, they were all put in place and all monitored closely. In fact, geologists and speleologists come through quite regularly as well. So we can all feel quite comfortable down underground today. So if you didn't hear me earlier, the tunnel that we've come through was actually put in following that earthquake, but not something we've had to use. Have a look up the top, someone you might recognise. We've got our famous wise men. Nativity scene at Christmas time. Or maybe a family of meerkats sitting on the top. Down on the left, a funny face looking at us. Big eye, big nose, and a cheeky smile.
Downwards. There.
Another lovely colour contrast. We've got a pure white stalactite sitting in the middle here, so it's just interesting to show you the different variations, just depending on what the soil is doing and how concentrated that calcium carbonate is. Now the cave, if you're wondering, was actually never inhabited by anybody. The Aboriginal people were a little frightened to enter the cave. They believed there was a spirit which they feared and respected called the Jinka. So they tended to stay away from the cave and also competition with dingoes for shelter as well. We're going to wander up a little bit further, so just mind your feet guys, it gets a little bit uneven through here and we've got one last little bend, so give yourselves plenty of room. Just up on the left though, we do have something a little bit different, a little bit of fossil soil. So it's amazing to know that this wasn't always limestone sitting below the ground, but once upon a time heavily vegetated above the ground. A bit more water. No, this has been pumped in as well, but it has actually been a pool of water for a long time. I'll just wait for the others to come through. I'm going to leave the torch off for a little while, just so you can see those lovely reflections in there.
Oh my goodness.
You might also notice a bit of a temperature difference too, particularly with the presence of water, so it does affect that. But yes, this is being pumped into the cave. You would have heard a little noise as we went from the connecting tunnel into the third chamber. So this is where this water is actually coming to. Many, many years ago it was constructed as a wishing well. In fact, if you have a look, there are a couple of coins sitting in there and you'll notice the difference in the colour. So when they sit in water for long periods of time, they do rust, they do corrode, and it can affect the water quality. So nowadays as a conservation department, not something we like to encourage, because today it's quite important For life in the cave, if you have a look around the edge, there's some tree roots just on the edge of that pool. You can see how they meet the water and mat together. A little bit of fungus would grow, and that would be ideal for the amphipods living in the cave. So who knows, a little bit of water somewhere that we can't see and a tree root, they could be living quite happily down here. A natural stream would simply continue from that direction around the cave that way. As you wander up the stairs, just mind your heads, gets a little bit low.
Get this smaller.
No, we're just heading back up to where we started.
Where's the glass?
Just on the right hand side, you might be interested to know you'll see a little bit of light. A little further down. And maybe where it's playing
Steve, Steve.
Yes. That's sad.
Yeah, this way, I think.
Yep.
Yes. But you are afraid.